Hello and welcome back to the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Elyachar, the chief content producer and writer of jakestake.com, a pop culture entertainment news website. If you're watching this on YouTube, go ahead and select the subscribe and like the video. It'd be awesome if you do that. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or on Apple Podcasts or anywhere our podcasts are, please subscribe and please give us a like. I am thrilled to welcome this incredible guest today. He's an actor, he's a comedian, and he's the host of one of my favorite podcasts, the Long Shot Leaders Podcast. So please help me welcome Michael Stein.
Hey, Jacob, I love your energy. You're just wonderful.
Thank you so much, Michael, and thank you so much for taking time in your schedule to do this.
My pleasure.
Alrighty, so before I do everything, guys, I always do research on these guys. So one of the things that I love that I figured out was I found out that he was part of one of my all-time favorite movies, Batman 1989. And as Michael organized the largest promotional event of the movie event at the time. So he worked with Goober Peters Productions and Warner Brothers. So how did you get started with that?
Well, I went out with his daughter. That's how I got started. But that's not what happened, really. That's not. What happened was I was the number one nightclub promoter in LA at that time for my age bracket. And an old friend of mine, acquaintance friend at the time, Chris Peters, the son of John Peters, who's partners with Peter Goober, we were up in Aspen. And this was my first time up in Aspen. I was the poor kid that grew up in a rich neighborhood of Encino. But when I went out with Elizabeth Goober, Peter Goober's daughter, who produced Batman with John Peters, they were Bel Air. They were really wealthy. And they were talking Hollywood. And I was felt like a fish out of water. And then I see Chris Peters with his family, the Peters family. And I'm with Peter Goober and Elizabeth Goober and their family. And I see Chris Peters wearing a black leather jacket and I'm wearing a black leather jacket. And he goes, "What's you been going on?" Because we knew each other from acquaintances from high school. He goes, "What's going on with you?" And I said, I'm a nightclub promoter now. And I said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "I'd like to get into nightclub promoting." And I was like, ding, ding, ding. And we walk into Mezzaluna restaurant. This is in Christmas time up in Aspen. And I said, I just took the table at that point. You're just a young and, you're cocky kid. I was 20 and I was like, I got an idea. We're going to create the biggest promotional party ever. We're going to rent out the coveted Park Plaza Hotel. If it's 5,000 people, we're going to, rent that out. And we should do a big promotional movie for the party for the movie Batman. So we mastermind this whole thing. 3 weeks later, I'm getting the Rolodex because this is in the 1989. You're getting the email, not email, regular mail addresses of every star in Hollywood. And 6 months later, it's a long story, but we did an amazing event, the two of us at the Park Plaza Hotel with Matt Dyke from Delicious Vinyl, who Tone Loc and Young MC, they were on his label. He was my DJ, and we had 5 DJs, 5 different rooms. It was crazy, and we had Prince's music there, and we had there's so much I can go on about that party, but it was crazy, and it was wonderful, and that's how I got to do that party.
Awesome. So we're not here to talk about Batman. We're here to talk about Long Shot Leaders. So can you please describe the Long Shot Leaders podcast origin story with my audience?
Yes. So I'm a long shot. I would not the worst long shot you ever heard, but I'm kind of a long shot. So I come from a long line of long shots. So I was going to do a podcast. It'd be a podcast about underdogs. So my grandmother escaped the Russian concentration camps before, on her way to America. My dad was a homeless New York street kid, became a multimillionaire only to become homeless again. I was born premature. I had the ADHD, ADD, whatever they call it. They didn't know what it was back then. I had health issues. Had dyslexia, all the fun-filled activities that, you might hear that, the challenges that, kids have these, sometimes. And, I didn't really have any success. I was, by all accounts, somewhat of a basket case emotionally and physically and mentally and everything. So only thing I had success in was making people laugh because I had self-deprecating humor. So I would make fun of myself and anything else I could have to get people to laugh. And I was great at that. But that wasn't really keeping me confident and really didn't change my life until when I was 10 or 11 years old, I saw the movie Rocky, like most young boys. And I said, here's a guy like me. He keeps on trying really hard. He's funny, but he fails a lot, but he's got heart. The only difference in Rocky and myself is that he's physically fit. So I said, from that day on, I'm going to work out every day and be like Rocky. And by the time I was 16 years old, I became a physical fitness trainer. I had much success as being physically fit. And then I realized, I could do two. Then I did stand-up comedy right after that because that's something I always did. And I said, I did two things that are really successful. Why not start a business and be an entrepreneur and an actor and a comedian? I told my high school tutor that, and she goes, not everybody's meant to do what they want to do. Maybe you should work with your hands. So I said, screw you. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to be like my dad, who was a business guy, but I'm not going to fail like he did in the end. I'm going to become the calculator kid because he made millions of dollars selling these calculators before he failed again. So I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to be an actor, a comedian. She says, okay, do whatever you want to do. Fine. So 2 weeks later, I graduate. The day after graduating high school, I start a business, and within 1 week it failed. It was a tool business. I was working out of my house, and I was like, it's summertime, I want to, get out. But I said, maybe my high school tutor's right, but 6 months later, after I did stand-up comedy, I brought a lot of people there. I said, if I could bring a lot of people to this, stand-up routine, I could probably bring people to nightclubs. And back in those days, nightclubs were really prestigious, and, they were really breaking big, and a nightclub promoter was a big thing. So within months, I became, the number one nightclub promoter for my age bracket, and my career took off there for several years. I did that. And then I wanted to be an actor after that. So I left that business. I burned the boats and went to be an actor. My first acting role was playing Dirk Diggler in the Dirk Diggler story, which eventually became the movie Boogie Nights, which I appear in as well. And then I decided, if my friend Paul Thomas Anderson, who can make a film like that, maybe I could do that too, right? So then I burned the boats again, and I left everything to become a production assistant to learn film production. And then I was broke, but I was able to scrape up some money and all the people I met, and then made an award-winning short film that won many awards and got bought by HBO and got me close to a movie deal. But after 2 years, no movie deal. And I said, well, screw it. I'm debt. I'm in broke now, and I got to, make this happen. But I'm going to make my own movie. I'm going to make a movie that Hollywood never let me make. So I started a company. I had nothing to do with Hollywood. I became an entrepreneur again. And within 6 months, it made $500,000. And I had money to make my movie. And I made a movie with Faye Dunaway, Andy Dick, and Coolio, and many other actors that you've seen, called Love Hollywood Style. And it won film festival awards, but it didn't make any money. And I almost spent all the money from the business I was making, almost like bottomed out again. And I finally got to a realization, I fell in love, and I was going to get married. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to not do what my dad did. I'm going to grow this business. And since that day, that business has earned over $100 million. And got to the point where I said, I've been wanting to do a podcast, just to kind of answer your question a long about way. If I was going to do a podcast, it would be about people that have gone through the hills and valleys of success and failure. Luckily, the second half of my life, I've had more success than failures than my younger days. And now that's why I'm doing a podcast called Long Shot Leaders, where we examine and talk about the stories of people that have found success, overcome large obstacles to find success.
Awesome. So podcast hosts have had different preparation processes before they welcome their guests. Can you describe your process to my audience?
Okay. It's a combo. You take what you know, right? So I was an actor, filmmaker. I was a writer. I was a stand-up comedian. I didn't mention this, but I got heavily involved in personal development since the age of 22. And you take all those things and you say, what can I bring? You have to be yourself. And what can I bring that I am to a podcast or an interview? Just about 20 minutes ago, I interviewed a lady, 86-year-old lady named Reba Murrell. And she's interviewed everybody in Hollywood, like everybody for like the past 45, 50 years.
Wow.
And we just talked about this. You bring what you know. So when you do stand-up comedy, the rapport with the audience is the most important thing. Don't get involved with your material so much. First of all, the rapport with the audience. When you're an actor listening, you got to listen. Acting is reacting, right? So to use that. When you're writing, What's your overall, end game in your story? What's the character need? When I interview somebody, we take a Save the Cat, John Truby story structure type of, structure. So I ask somebody, I've asked this my whole life though, with people, not in so many words, but now I ask people on the podcast, when you were 9 or 10 years old, what was one of your major emotional needs? You ask people, because that'll give you answers. And then you start to get selflessly involved in their life and their story. And you use your internal dialogue, which is an acting tool. You're constantly asking yourself, well, how do I feel about that? What does that mean to me? And you're constantly not about yourself. You're about the other person you're talking to. Right now, we're on the flip side. If I was interviewing Jacob right now, I'd be totally getting involved in everything about his life and selflessly involved and just going on that ride like it's a movie and just totally getting enthralled with everything about him. This is just my style, but this is what I do to get connected like an actor would to a written piece. If I was a stand-up comedian, really, trying to find, comedians are constantly like a shark searching for premise, shattered assumption, and punchline. You're right. So I'm constantly trying to find that, but I ask about serious things on my podcast, which is a juxtaposition being a comedian. But those are the tools that I use as a broad scope. And then there's more specific things I'll do, from there.
Awesome. So who have been some of your favorite guests so far and why do they stand out?
The first one that stands out, because I'm a Jewish boy from Encino and my grandmother escaped the Russian concentration camps, is Ben Lesser, who's a 92-year-old Holocaust survivor. That was a 2.5-hour long episode, 2-part episode. It kind of had an intermission, kind of like Ten Commandments does in the movie. And I basically went through his whole life, and I guess the best thing about that interview is I do a 7.5-minute intro, but the majority of that interview is letting him talk, letting him, and he told that interview so well that the best part I did was shut up, through most of it to let him speak, because first of all, it's history. Second of all, it's a personal thing for me. My mother, my grandmother looking down on, going, this is, my daughter, I wanted this to be very special. So that's the first one, because of that connection. And also I thought it was important for anybody else that had to deal with persecution. The other interviews are my mentors. So Eric Morris, who's a 90-year-old, one of the oldest acting teachers in Hollywood right now. He's on his 13th book. He's been teaching acting since he was in his mid-20s. Best friends with Nicholson. Nicholson writes the preface to his first book, and that was just a wealth of just wonderful. He's in my movie with Love Hollywood Style. He plays a psychologist. So having him come back and be on my podcast, talk about acting, talk about our history together was amazing. And then the other is my other mentor, which is Greg Dean, who's the foremost stand-up comedy coach in the world. He teaches the dynamics of what makes people laugh. And that is an enormous amount of content, but we got to talk about his history and our relationship again. And it was very fulfilling to kind of grow up with these people, because I studied with them since I was in like my late teens, early 20s, and to come back and have them on a podcast and kind of dissect that. And those were very gratifying. And then there's the ones that you don't know. And that would be like somebody recently who his episode's coming out in about a week or two. He's written a book called The Unlucky Sperm Club, and his mother was raped when she was 15 by a police officer. And the mother's father killed the police officer and went to jail for life. And she ended up getting pregnant, and she had the baby, and the baby was him. And he wrote the book, The Unlucky Sperm Club. And he had a 15-year-old mother when he was born, and they were raised by her mother because she's only 15. And the mother that raised him, the grandmother, was single because now her husband is in jail for life for killing the police officer that raped her daughter. It goes on and on and on. And there's more to the story than that, but that's the premise. And those are the kind of things that stick out when you talk about, he's now an accomplished author and an amazing person and very successful. And those are the kind of stories that we've told, anything from the gamut, from funny episodes to things like that.
That's incredible. Now, I have 6 people that I picked out from your podcast, And these are some of my favorite guests of yours. So I want to start off with somebody that's a very familiar name to a lot of people and familiar face, especially for me who watch Hollywood Squares, Tom Bergeron era. And that is Academy Award writer and also 6-time Emmy-winning writer, Bruce Valanche.
Yes, Bruce Valanche, wonderful, sui generis, and original guy. For those that don't know, he's directed like 14 of the Academy Awards when they were funny. Remember those days?
Yeah.
And he is, I like to call him a counterpuncher. He's, from a comedy standpoint, he said, I've never heard anybody tell me that before, but what he's really great at is that when somebody says something, and this is probably why he was on that show, Hollywood Squares, which I never watched, but when somebody says a joke or just says anything, he's a great counter, puncher. He's a great improviser to come back with something that's really creative and funny. And he is one of a kind. And he's part of that. If you see who we're talking about, the beard, he doesn't have a beard now, but he in the late 80s and all throughout the 90s was that funny looking it guy in Hollywood, the Academy Awards, the Grammys, the Emmys, the Golden Globes. He's that guy that would be at all the parties and just a fixture. He was a very interesting part of Hollywood entertainment history.
Absolutely. And speaking of history as well, Mark Lanau, now he founded the Improv, and not to mention all the names that he was in his past. Joan Rivers, turning down Andy Kaufman to be in his troupe, and also working with Henry Winkler before he got the role that made him the star, aka the Fonz.
Yes, Mark Lanau. Mark is I knew Mark way before this interview. We got to work with him, but I never really got to know him well. He is Bud Friedman started the Improv. The Improv, by the way, for the people that don't know, stand-up comedians, there's Pepsi and there's Coke, right? There's the Comedy Store and then there's the Improv. And the Improv is an iconic comedy place. And Mark Lanau took it over when it went to LA for Bud Friedman, because Mark was one of the comedians. Mark was part of Off the Wall, the iconic improv group. And he was also had some money at the time, a business guy. He had that beautiful, he was also an actor. He was in Thank God It's Friday and played, a lot of good late 70s movies. So he buys a portion or half of the, he's a partner now. So it was Bud Friedman and Mark Lanau's Improv. He's the architect of really the modern day Studio 54-esque hip, cool dancing at the end of the night, at the comedy club. There was big, like right now Netflix has comedy specials. Back in the day, the Improvs that started that, they'd have this Night at the Improv specials that came on there. And Mark Lanau is the architect of all that. And you've people that might recognize him as an actor in, let's say, The Wedding Singer. He's the father that punches out, Adam Sandler, The Wedding Singer. He's a very interesting, dynamic combination of entrepreneur and entertainer.
Awesome. Now we got to go to your serious podcast. So Greg Garfield, he was COVID-19 patient zero. He lost his fingers and his toes. He's also survived an avalanche and even told that story on Ellen DeGeneres' show.
Right. Oddly enough, Greg Garfield is an old high school friend of mine, and hung out with him, partied many times. And right after we were, I moved to Texas, and he gets involved in this avalanche, and that was something that was on the news and everything. And then when this COVID thing started, he just got hit hard, and he and 12 other guys went skiing in the Italian Alps. And he got it the worst. They all got it, and he got it the worst. And he was patient zero at the hospital he went to in Burbank. And he ended up losing all his fingers, or most of his fingers and most of his toes. And he, had 1% chance to live. There's more dynamics to his story. I can go on, but he survived. And he is an amazing person. That guy's like, nope, going to make the best of this. And he's already got like 15 plans ahead. He's a very successful guy in and out of, business, and just he's a go-getter, and he's a very well-spoken, dynamic person, and a dear old friend, and I love him very much.
Awesome. Erica Anneberg. I love Anneberg. I'm sorry if I butchered everyone's name.
Anneberg.
Her origin story combining her love of entrepreneurship and jewelry making is something I rarely see.
Yeah, Erica Anneberg. She is an old high school friend. Again, she used to go to my nightclubs and everything. And watching her career take off, she's so, if you look at her picture on our website, she's so super cool, fashionable. She's had like several major, she's kind of like a jewelry pioneer, what she done, and kind of like in her own right, like a Kendra Scott, jewelry, anybody knows the jewelry world. And her whole life has been, creating these really cool brands and businesses. And, she's also, she has a wife and a kid, and she's, got this really cool backstory to her on her life and the challenges and finding herself, not just in personal life, but in business. And a really interesting story. So there are a lot of sub stories to Erica Anneberg, and, how she's executed her businesses and her life.
Awesome. I want to talk about some of your recent podcast conversations. Alec Watson, I got to say, it was very interesting to learn how he went from music to photography, and not to mention the opportunity to work with various people such as Britney Spears. So being in the middle of a U.S. and China, when President Obama was in office and he had to take a photo with the president of China. So it was very interesting hearing all that.
Yeah. Alec Watson, he constantly reinventing himself. That's the one thing I took away from him. What's great about him is that, he very nomad, kind of eclectic family. They moved from here to there. And then they said, okay, your last year of high school, we're going to have you just, be an exchange student in New Zealand. And then he falls in love with the Debbie Gibson, at that time, that was the cool artist back in the 80s. She was the Debbie Gibson of New Zealand. So then he learns to play one song on the piano, and then he's in a band with her now. And they create, and he segues into that, and then the recording artist, and then he moves to Nashville, and then they're doing that. That's all at a young age, but then that falls through, and really doesn't do it well. He becomes a recording engineer, to segue into that, and that kind of is the next stepping stone, but it's not the big, mover for him. And then he really finds photography. He starts making, that's his big push, and it's a great testament, because then he becomes a photographer for movie stars, and taking pictures, like you said, for the president of China, and then directing commercials and a lot of media, and then then COVID happens, and you think this guy could rest on his laurels because he's got he's got a fitness model wife now, and he lives on an island off of Vancouver, and he's doing really well. But when COVID hits, he says, you know what, I'm going to get my Harvard degree in I forgot what it was, but I think in some kind of communications, or in media or something. I think it's media, at Harvard. And it just constantly, what a testament of somebody that reinvents himself. And there's a lot of lessons to be learned by his story.
Awesome. And rounding that out is one of your latest ones. I heard the excitement in your voice when you were talking to John Lee Dumas and talking about his podcast, The Entrepreneur is on Fire, and also his new book, The Common Path to Uncommon Success. Okay,
so you guys like John Lee Dumas? Who doesn't know him? Let me tell you about John Lee Dumas. First of all, the reason why I knew I wanted to do a podcast, I didn't know who he was. Got an audio book on podcasting by John Lee Dumas, and he's just a regular guy. He just, nice guy. He's in the Army, didn't know what he wanted to do, came back to Maine, and around 2012, he just started listening to podcasts. He says, I want to do a podcast. And he had thought of something a little different. Remember how MySpace wasn't that much different, or Facebook's not that much different than MySpace? Mm-hmm. Basically, Facebook is just a less spammy version of MySpace with, little nuances. Well, he just took, podcasting, which wasn't brand new in 2012 and 13, right around when he started. But he says, I'm going to do something slightly different. I'm going to do 7 days a week. And I'm just going to entrepreneurs. And he created Entrepreneurs on Fire, went from obscurity to totally getting 1.2 downloads a month. You, Jacob, you and I know how staggering an amount that is.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's 1.2 million
a month.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Not a year.
Like Joe Rogan. That's like Joe Rogan level.
It's crazy. Yes. I mean, I think Joe gets more, but this is a guy that was obscure. Joe Rogan has a career of stand-up comedy and UFC and sitcom and television. Fear Factor. And yeah, it goes on and on. Joe has molded his career for a long period of time. John Lee Dumas, though, is a wonderful testament. So, and he could only do a 15-minute interview because he's like, Mike, he's like, listen, you got to know right away. He does 20 interviews in one day, like he talks about in that episode. He also, to promote his book, he did 350 interviews to promote the book. And I don't know how many month period, but not that long. And he's the battle of attrition, and that guy just goes for it. And that's why I was excited to talk to him, because I do listen to his podcast. I listen to WTF as far as that's concerned. Mark Maron, great podcaster. And I just think that John Lee Dumas, I was excited to talk to him because we're in the medium. We're talking. We're on a podcast, and to me, he's the best podcaster that came out of nowhere. And then created his podcast and became with 1.2 million. That's something that's just amazing to me.
It is. So I know you talked about Mark Maron, but who else is on your dream guest list?
There's the first thing that comes to mind is who's on my dream guest list to have on my podcast would be somebody that is not totally known. I love the real stories of not that celebrities aren't real people. I do enjoy the interview with celebrity now and then, but somebody that's out there that has that extraordinary long shot story that that no one's heard of. That's exciting to me because I'm surprised, because no one knows and I don't know it, and I try to keep things fresh when I talk to somebody. So there's discovery. Now, as far as people that I would love to do, my long shot to get these people, because agents and managers are really hard to break through when you want a celebrity. Casting a movie, when I would cast my independent films, I hate talking to the agents because they're like, no, everything's no. It's like, you don't even know if they would want to do it. You don't even know if they're busy. They might just be, staying home eating ice cream next Saturday, and they need 1 day shoot, and they might want to do this because they might like the written piece. You're not even entertaining it. So it's just like, I understand their dilemmas, but the long story short, the person I would like, who's the ultimate long shot for me, one of the top 5 would be Sylvester Stallone, who I talk about in the incipient of my podcast. Is I talk about my story. He talk about underdog stories, right? So that would be one of the big ones.
If anyone gets by Stallone, it's you.
I hope so. I mean, everybody in the world would want him on their podcast or anything, but you never know.
Awesome. So why should my audience check out the Long Shot Leaders podcast?
Why shouldn't they? Why should they? Well, first of all, I think there's a lot of value to be learned by people that have overcome large obstacles to find success. Now, you could, the reason why I think it's so valuable and why I chose that format is because I do listen to other podcasts where they have lessons from, people that are experts. But I like to listen to somebody that had that arc. First of all, the retention level of memory when you're learning a lesson, if there's a story behind it, you're going to retain it and then you'll be able to utilize it. When you find somebody with the iron sharpens iron. So when they started something and they were not likely to succeed and they overcome that, they really have ironclad techniques and value to share because of what they had to overcome. And now they excel at that. To me, those gems, because everybody out there that hasn't done something thinks, well, that guy they search for excuses, or they search not just excuses, but we all do that. So, well, they inherited it or this or that. Well, let's talk to the people that had to come over, major obstacles. And I'm not just talking about financial. It could be, somebody we just interviewed somebody the other day, kind of like a bonus episode, who was like Nomadland, the movie Nomadland, where they were perpetually homeless. And then they were homeless since they were 12 to 24, half of their life. And then they finally, they didn't want to be homeless all that time. It just happened. And they finally, found the success that would be average to some people, but they are now have a steady job. They're a manager at a business, and they're trying to start a recording company, like a music, label company. And that to me is major success because the arc started from so low, and that was an obstacle that was hard to overcome.
Thank goodness they did that. Alrighty. So Michael, where can my audience download episodes of the Long Shot podcast, and also where can they connect with you on social media?
Well, if you just go to longshotleaders.com, that's the website that for the podcast. But you'll also see my social, on there too. If you just go to Long Shot Leaders, you'll see, the Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that stuff, and just go to longshotleaders.com.
Awesome, guys. Now, if you missed an episode of the Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar podcast, head to Apple Podcasts, Deezer, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and Spreaker. Just type in Jake's Take with Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Once again, JACOBELYACHAR. And also, are you on social media? Because I'm on social media too. Head to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Jacob Elyachar, JACOBELYACHAR. Now, it is Jake's Take's 10th anniversary, Michael.
10th anniversary? What do you mean 10th anniversary? 10th anniversary of what?
10th anniversary of me starting this whole thing. And it all started with a blog, jakes-take.com.
10 years?
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that is impressive. Wow, that's so 2011.
Yes, August 2011 is our 10th anniversary milestone. So if you want to see all the articles, including my music coverage and also coverage of America's Got Talent, The Masked Singer, and also some of my cool interviews I've done in the past, and also some of my reviews of music and movies, head over to jakes-take.com. Once again, jakes-take.com. Now, guys, it's just me doing all of this, from organizing the interviews, making sure about the tech, paying for the website, everything. Please consider heading to PayPal to help keep jakes-take.com alive and my platform up and running if you're financially able to now. However, if you can't, please like and subscribe to my podcast and also my social media channels. It's incredible. And Michael, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. You're one incredible person, and I'm very grateful for the time that we've had today.
I'm grateful too. Thank you, JPEG. Really appreciate it.
Alrighty, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, have a fantastic day. Goodbye.